Hey everybody, this is Dan from Cerberus LiveScan. Welcome back to another edition of Solutions for the Firearm Industry, our podcast that we're walking through some of the ins and outs of the NFA, SOT, FFL process. If you missed the first couple versions, go check out a couple episodes. Go check out. We talk about how to get your SOT. We talk about how to get your eForms account set up, and we talk about the types of forms and how they're used and when they're used. And in this episode, we're going to talk about transferee types. So once you're inside, say, Form 1 or a Form 4, what are the transferee types that we can utilize to move an NFA item from where it is now to the right entity or to create the NFA item if you're using Form 1. So again, if you haven't liked or shared the podcast, please do that now and follow it so you can keep up to date on the weekly releases as we push out the episodes. And with that, we'll get into this. So what I got here, made a little documentation on what the different types of transferees are. For the most part, we'll talk about three, the primary ones, basically individual and trust. Those are the big ones. And then there's also a corporation you can transfer to as well. There is a fourth type that is allowed, which would be a FFL, that is a non-SOT. That functionality currently, as of June of 24, is not turned on inside of eForms. But these three currently are. So individual, trust, and corporation. So a little bit, let's talk about what it is. So individual is plain and simple a single person that can possess and utilize the NFA item. The trust is a legal entity that can hold assets. And a corporation is a legal entity that is, a business type. Think of an LLC, think of a corporation, etc. There are times where a company needs to hold on to NFA items for R&D, for movies, for security corporations, etc. That's where those type apply. But end of the day, it is still an entity. Oh, and one caveat, I'm not a lawyer, so do not take this all as legal advice. This is simply what I know from doing a ton of forms and working with the industry these past years. So let's talk briefly about the two common ones and why we would want to do an individual versus a trust. Okay. So the big benefit of a trust is that the item can be shared in between the active trustees. So usually as an FFL, when I'm talking to somebody who's new to the process, I will ask them a question. If they have anybody in their life that on a Friday night they would lend a firearm to, that they would bring back, that person would bring back on a Sunday. And typically that's a pretty visceral answer of, hell no, nobody gets my guns, or yeah, my dad, my brother, my best friend, my spouse, whatever, right? So typically there's a very concise answer to that question. If they answer no, nobody gets my guns, then the individual is absolutely the way to go. So if they answer, yeah, I would trust my brother and lend it to them, then we talk about the trust piece of it and what that means. So the active trustees can possess and borrow that item. If a individual were to lend, if the item is on an individual stamp and it were lent to somebody else, that would constitute an illegal transfer of the one who owns the stamp, and the person who's in possession of it would be possession of an illegal item. So not things you want to play with because they're federal charges. So that's why we talk about this a little bit. So on the trust, if the NFA item is held inside of a trust, all the active trustees have right and access to that item, and they can borrow it and share it and utilize it without having the main person around. Now, if it's an individual, you can't lend it to somebody, but you can go to the range and somebody else can shoot it or utilize it. You just can't leave it in their possession or let them leave the range with it. But by all means, you can take them to the range and you can let them borrow it. You can show off that item. You just can't let them sole possession and leave your control, if that all makes sense. On a corporation, the directors officers have the power to exercise control over that item. And then if they're valid employees on a letterhead type piece, they also can possess those items. So those are the who can possess type question. So documentation, say you're doing a Form 4 or a Form 1. For documentation, you need basically the demographics of the individual. For an individual, you need their photo, passport style photo, plain background, no glasses, no hat, no sweatshirt, mullet type stuff. a neutral background, 2x2 type photo, and then prints, whether that is an EFT, strongly recommend our system for that, but an EFT or hard cards that get mailed in. So that's all you need for the individual for the documentation piece of it. For a trust, we need to create a 5320.23, otherwise known as the Responsible Person Questionnaire or RPQ form. I need one form per serial number, per active trustee, as well as the trust documents. So the RPQ form, so say there are two silencers that are going to get sold, and there are 3 people that are active trustees on the trust. I need to generate 6 forms, 2 serial numbers, 3 trustees, 6 forms need to get made because I need to make 1 RPQ per serial number per trustee that's active. What about beneficiaries? Do I need to do fingerprints for beneficiaries? No. The beneficiaries really don't matter in the eyes of the NFA and the ATF until all the trustees are gone. So if the intention is that I want to hold this thing in trust, I'm the single trustee, and when I pass, I want to make sure it gets to my kids or nephew, niece, whatever. They would be beneficiaries. The beneficiaries would get it if all the trustees are gone, and they don't need fingerprints and photos until that time comes. So actually, they don't need it at all. But if you want to share that item, though, they have to be a active trustee. Okay. If you're doing a Form 4 for a corporation, same 5320.23 per officer or director. And then the articles of incorporation need to be submitted to say that, or charter, whatever it is in the state that that corporation or entity is organized in. That needs to be uploaded to the electronic documents section of e-forms to prove that the company exists. They may also come back and ask for the EIN to prove the company is there. But from what I understand, how I read it, articles of incorporation and then 5320 RPQ for the corporation. So let's talk a little bit about costs. So obviously everything on that line is plus the $200 tax stamp or $5 tax stamp if you're doing an AOW. But for an individual, there's really no extra cost per the application side of it. So you basically would log into eForms, work through it, no additional cost to get set up except that $200 stamp. On a trust, you have to make the trust at some point. So there's going to be the cost of that initial trust creation, and that can range wildly based on where you're at and who you go to. So think 150 to 250 to whatever, depending on who you go to and who you talk to. But that's initial trust fee. And then some shops will charge a slight handling fee for the RPQs if you have more than 2 or 3. So typically the first one is many times included. Depends on shop policy what it is. If you want to go after the corporation side of stuff, each state has their own fee structure of where you incorporate in. In Wisconsin, where I'm at, it's about 125 to generate the articles of incorporation for the state, and there's an annual fee, approximately $25, to make sure that that corporation stays in good standing, and then also possibly that RPQ fee as you go to the FFL or as you guys are handling it. So as of June of 24, rough numbers, the application time for a Form 4 for an individual can be measured in days. We have seen them as fast as 24 hours to 24 hours to 4 or 5 days. If that client is a individual or an instant NICS approval. So if they buy a long gun and you run them through NICS and they come back immediately as proceed, there's a good chance that that Form 4 will get approved in days. Basically, a bulk push goes out to FBI. NICS runs the background check. That file comes back. The approved ones come back to ATF, and then somebody at branch will action the form and approve it. One thing to note, unlike the Brady bill and regular Title I Type 1 firearms, the FBI has to answer the NICS request in approximately 5 days. So due to Brady, they have to do something with it and answer it. NFA, that doesn't apply. So it can be open in a status or delayed or researching or whatever for months until somebody gets to it. So per roundtable I sat in a couple months ago, about 70% of the applications that are going in will have an instant NICS approval. So 70% of your customers will get a instant, and that means they should get their Form 4 approved within a couple days. If it goes longer than that, they have a common name, they're a cadency where one of the other cadencies is not a good person, then it may delay and it can be the 3-4 months. Trusts, for the most part, because of the additional legal review and the paperwork and processing that it takes to get that Form 4 through the process, we are seeing approximately 4 months on that, and corporations are 4+ months. Again, legal review, additional processing, additional steps inside of NFA branch to work through it. So, transfer at death. On an individual, what's going to happen is per the estate or will, caveat with whatever the state law that says on top of that, those items will transfer tax-free on a Form 5. They will be held in probate by the executor of the estate, and then 3-4 months go by and they will get transferred. That Form 5 is very similar to a Form 4, except it's tax-free, needs prints, needs photos. If it's going to another trust or another entity, then it'll need the documentation that goes with it. But it is a tax-free transfer, but each serial number will require a Form 5 to get it to the legal heirs as it goes through. So what does that mean? Paperwork, time, a little bit of frustration that you pass as an individual, your heirs will get the item, assuming they're not prohibited. But it's going to take 3-4 months, and you have to do one Form 5 per serial number to get them moved. If the items are held in a trust, it's effectively immediate. You basically attach the death certificate to the trust and update the trustee active list to remove the person who passed, and the next trustee in line, or per how the trust is set up with the next successor, retains ownership and access to those items. If all the trustees are gone, then per the trust, or at least per the verbiage of the trust, it would go to the beneficiaries and move that way. So there's no dwell, there's no time, there's no additional paperwork to move and control assets at time of death. It simply goes to how the trust is written and stated. For a corporation, corporations effectively don't really die unless they are very bad businesses, but it doesn't really matter if someone comes or goes on it. You simply update who the officers and directors are, and the organization keeps moving on. So good summary on here, a little bit of reference, and helps hopefully demystify a little bit of who the trustees or who the transferee types are for a Form 1 or a Form 4. Right now, the majority of what we're seeing are individuals because people want to get that item immediately, and that the turnaround times are coming very quickly. The trusts are still a thing. They are still getting submitted, and we're still processing trusts, predominantly with fathers and children, or families, brothers type stuff is typically the usual relationship. Corporations we don't see very much of in our area for that. So with that, I'll show you what the RPQ looks like if you haven't seen that, if you're following along on screen. But this is the responsible person questionnaire that needs to be filled out, effectively the legal name of the entity. So this would be the trust name or the corporation name in box 2. Box 3 is the name of the individual that is doing it. We fill out their demographics, or they fill out their demographics as we go through it. This is where we attach a photo to it, the firearm data. That's where you need a RPQ form per serial number, per firearm, per Form 4. We got to pull in the Clio data for that resident, and then they have to answer the questions on here. Basically, are they a prohibited person or not? Then signature. So Cerberus will help you fill this stuff out rather quickly. So that's one benefit of using our live scan system. We actually have the PDF generator built into this that we use the data that we collect as we're doing Cerberus live scan and getting a customer into the system. We can generate these RPQ forms very quickly. So with that, that's the RPQ form. We'll go a little more deeper on that on some future episodes. And then lastly, if you are finding value to what we're doing, like and share the podcast. You can find the rest of the episodes that we've done and are available up here on the main page. It's available on most of the platforms that are out there, wherever you get your podcasts from. Our website, petersonfarmsusa.com, gets you more information on what you need of our product line and our two major products, flagship is Cerberus Live Scan. It does the fingerprinting, it does the client data, it does the PDFs. It has an integration with 199 Trust to help you sell trust and get trust to your customers. And then Merlin, which is our distribution warehouse search tool. We're pulling from approximately 11 different distributors and warehouses to put everything on one pane of glass so you can find inventory, find pricing, research stuff. And half of those, 6, you can order from currently. So you can build the order inside of Merlin and submit it. So again, if you like what you're seeing, share our podcast, like and share it on the platform you're listening to. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.